This is Pucks in 7 with Ryan Payton and Victoria Matiash.
It is known as the fastest game on earth, and if you're a broadcaster, you need to be very quick at what you do because the play is back and forth, up and down, all around the rink, and for the NHL, it's very quick. Author and sports fan Kirk McKnight joining me here on Pucks in 7. He is the author of The Voices of Hockey, broadcasters reflecting on the fastest game on earth. And Kirk, look, first of all, great to have you on. We'll go through as many things as we can in the time that we have. But this is an absolutely astonishing book. Take me into the genesis of it, and also as well, you got to be so quick at this thing because, as you know, and I do too, and all of the listeners and watchers do, this is one fast game.
It sure is a fast game. I don't think that this book would be here if it weren't for me having written another book before it, which is called The Voices of Baseball, where I spoke with the broadcasters of baseball, some of the biggest ever, like Vince Scully and Euchre and all those guys, and Dick Enberg. But so I had the concept of, getting these broadcasters to talk about their most memorable experiences and most memorable games called, and describing a little bit more what they do and their craft. But with hockey, it's a little different than baseball because it's obviously a lot faster paced. So my goal was to try to get the craziness of hockey and the raw essence of hockey and what a broadcaster experiences. I think the best way to describe hockey is when Pat Foley went from Grand Rapids to Chicago. His first game, he's a Hall of Famer now, he's retired, but first game broadcasting for the Blackhawks, there was a dump out. It was supposed to be a dump out, and the goalie misplayed it. So it was a 180-foot goal because the goalie just misplayed it, so that's already in and of itself just wow. And then a fan came onto the ice and was wrestling with people, and they had to drag him out, and there was fights everywhere. And Pat Foley goes, "Really? It's like this up here?" And that's what I mean. You hear all the stories from the junior leagues and stuff like that, but it happens in the National Hockey League level as well. So I wanted to encapsulate all that craziness and get it and show people that, hey, even at the highest level of this sport, you never know what you're going to get.
I assume I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you have much more of an appreciation now for NHL broadcasters after you have talked to them and written this book?
I absolutely do. Yeah. We can tune into a TV broadcast and just realize how difficult that is. Now, with a radio broadcast where the people actually can't see the action, you're basically just as intense, using just as much wording, using just as much of your larynx and your pipes as you can, and you're still doing all that, trying to paint the picture while the game is moving as fast as it can. Dropping a name here, Bob Costas, perfect example of this. He was saying how certain sports are a certain way. With football, they line up every 40 seconds. The play's going to run. It's very, very routine. It's very one after the other. Hockey's not like that. Yeah. Hockey is definitely one of those things where there's a turnover. All of a sudden, within 2.5 seconds, there's a turnover, and you might be having a goal because you turn the puck over like deep in your zone. And so your inflection really shifts pretty quickly, and you have to be on top.
On the cover of the book is, and I'm really glad because this is, you talk about hockey and you talk about rivalries and matchups, historic ones, and one of them has to be the Red Wings and the Avalanche in the 90s, and you have Chris Osgood and Patrick Waugh. You go through, again, some of the broadcasters that you spoke to. It's one thing for you and I to watch something like that. But for those moments to happen, especially in those games that those two teams played, they absolutely, Kirk, hated each other. You know that. But for broadcasters to try to come to terms with what they're seeing and articulate it, that is such a skill. Can you take us into some of those Red Wings Avalanche meetings?
Well, that night of March 26, 1997 is circled on every Detroit fan's calendar in history, basically, because that is the night that shifted everything for them. Those previous 3 seasons, they pretty much had what everybody thought of as the best team in hockey, but they couldn't get over the hump. They got beat in the first round by San Jose. Then they got swept in the finals by the Devils. Then, with having won record amount of games in the 95-96 season, they didn't even make it to the Cup Final because Colorado knocked them out. And not only that, they knocked him out, and Claude Lemieux broke Chris Draper's draw. So you had this festering that happened for months, and that's what really truly created that rivalry, was that first season and that bad blood that started between them. And then over the course of the next 6 seasons, you have Detroit winning three more cups, and you have the Avalanche winning 1 more cup. So you have 5 cups in 7 seasons between 2 teams. You cannot convince me that there was a better rivalry in any of the major sports, not even Yankees, Red Sox.
No, I agree.
And so the broadcasters, seeing this all unravel before their eyes, they are realizing what is happening. They are realizing that night of March 26, 97, they are realizing that this is some kind of difference. This is some kind of spark that really just ignited the team. They weren't nearly as good in the 96-97 season as they were the year before. That's the team that they got. That's the year they got over that hump. They beat the Avalanche in the Western Conference Final that year, and they swept the Flyers. So that was the end of a 42-year drought. A broadcaster sees what's happening, but you just never know. And sometimes it just happens so fast. You're like, is this really unraveling before my eyes? And it is. And they're able to. The good ones are able to just to be able to act upon it and to be able to really to capitalize on the moment.
There's some ones that you did speak to in the book. There's Doug Plagins, John Shorthouse, Brendan Batchelor. The list goes on and on and on. But a couple of them have been doing this for a long time. Nick Nixon is now done with doing his time with the Kings. Joe Bowen is going into, I think, his 45th season, Kirk, if I'm not mistaken, something like that, as the voice of the Toronto Maple Leafs. I just find that unbelievable to think that there is an individual who has been with one specific team, one organization for that long. And you could essentially, if you wanted to, I'm sure, just write a book on Joe Bowen's story and also say Nick Nixon, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I thought about that. And if people want to ask, a lot of times that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, how come you didn't bring this broadcaster in? I was like, well, I brought in 65 and I'm trying to cover 30 teams.
It's a good amount.
I know that we could have gotten this guy or this guy or this guy, but you got to realize I'm not writing a 500-page book.
Yeah.
I'm trying to encapsulate every team. But you see these other books, and it's great for those respective markets. You get a book where it's all about our Stanley Cup run.
Yeah.
The thing is, though, like that market, they all know the story. They're not learning anything new that they didn't already see, that they didn't already follow, especially if they're hard fanatics. But with this book, if you're looking at these other 31 markets, you're starting to see some of their glory moments. Maybe you're involved in those on the losing side in some of those chapters, but you still see kind of the thing what it means. And that's kind of what gave me a better appreciation of some of the teams when I talk to the broadcasters, because I'm like, yeah, I remember that being a certain fan, being a Red Wings fan. I remember when San Jose beat the Red Wings, and that just shocked me in that first round. It was like it was 2 years after the Sharks went like 11-70.
That's
or something.
right. Yeah,
and
they were terrible.
Just awful. And the Red Wings everybody thought they were going to just take off with everything. And here they are losing in the first round to the Sharks. And to be able to see the other side of the puck, to see how much that meant to the fans, and like what a Cinderella story that season was for them to make the playoffs like that and to beat the Red Wings. It was enough for them, and that's what I feel like encompasses the book, is that you're able to kind of see the pain of defeat, but you also see the glories and the throes of victory. And you talk about Joe Bowen and talk about the tenure that he has.
Yeah.
I think the way to put that into perspective is when Joe Bowen started, Harold Ballard was still owning the team.
It's a long time ago.
And Toronto fans are going to be like, if Toronto fans just kind of put that into perspective, they'll say, holy Mackinac.
Yeah. Well done. Well said. Yeah, he's one of the greats. And I know that if he can, certainly, and not just Toronto fans want this, has been since 67, but he'd love to go out with a you-know-what by the time the season's done in Toronto. But we have a ways to go. The season hasn't even started yet. Kirk McKnight joining me, author of The Voices of Hockey. He looked back to 65 broadcasters in the game, past and present. There are so many moments in the game. And when I was looking at this, one of the ones that is discussed, and one of the ones I remember vividly to this day, Kirk, I'm sure you do as well, is the Martin McSorley, Donald Brashear incident, Boston and the Vancouver Canucks. I remember to this day, the night that it happened, I went in the next day to work. It was on television. We were watching it, and I just kept seeing it over and over and over again. Hockey's a great game, but it can get pretty ugly, can't it?
I mean, that incident, and that's the thing. John talking about that, John Shorehouse for the Canucks talking about that. He says, I'm kind of famous for making 2 calls that were just both very ugly. The other one was the Bertuzzi hit, where as it actually Canuck hitting somebody else. But and to talk about those moments as a broadcaster, it's kind of hard, because it's kind of like he kind of stepped out of his own role as a broadcaster because he was so shocked. He was just like, I can't believe he just did that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's a famous, the Bartman incident in baseball. Let's just switch over to baseball for 2 seconds, just because for the sake of broadcasting. I'm pretty sure that the story goes, and a lot of people gave a lot of criticism for this, was that Joe Buck, that night when Bartman kind of interfered with the fan, I'm pretty sure Buck is heard on the TV call going, why? Just kind of like he was just, you know, and not containing his emotion because he's just like, oh my gosh, you know, we're about to witness history. These guys are 8 outs from their first pennant in that would have been almost 60 years for the Cubs at that point in 2003. You know, you sometimes forget that you're a broadcaster, and you sometimes just the shock of it all, and you kind of have to retain your composure. And I think that's kind of what John developed into it, molded into in the moment. But at first he was just so shocked. He said it to his parties, like he just hit him. I can't believe, you know. Yeah. And those are the moments in hockey, and it's really hard to kind of restrain yourself in that, I'm sure.
You got to keep the professionalism, but at the same time, you turn into a fan watching at home and screaming if you want to, right? Cursing at the screen and saying, I can't believe that happened. No, that's one of the skills, again, that these broadcasters have in sports, in hockey and baseball, specifically what we just talked about. One of the other greats that you spoke to, and you've spoken to so many different incredible broadcasters in this book, Sam Rosen. He is, again, one of those ones that's been around a long time. He is now done. The whole Bruins and Rangers and going into the stands thing, Kirk, I remember that as well. And again, we talk about memories to this day. That's not something that's going to be gone from anybody's memory, regardless if you're a Bruins or a Rangers fan. They remember that, and I know that Rosen does.
I think when I'm trying to convince somebody about hockey, to watch hockey, to get into it, anytime I do that, I start with the Bruins going into the stands. And
yeah, that's a good one.
Because, you know, people are familiar with Slapshot, and they think it's really just it's satire. Let's not say that it's not satire, but it's real. It's real, and it has been known to happen. That's the opening of the book is Bob Costas basically being broadcasting in a Slapshot type moment with Syracuse in Jamestown or whatever that back there. And that's the thing. Fans are the players going into the stands and hitting the fans. It cracks me up that Mike Mulberry was one of those players who beat the guy with his own shoe.
That's right.
And years later, he's a broadcaster for NBC, and then he makes one comment that just got a little wrong, and that's what did him in. Right. It's funny. This guy beats a guy with his own shoe, but this is what does.
But that's okay.
So that's just the complexity of the sport, and I think that's another thing that Sam stresses is that kind of stuff doesn't happen anymore. You know, you see that glass? You see how high it is now? Well, why? You see why there's that net there? Very unfortunate incident. Now, this is why.
When you spoke to a lot of these different broadcasters, did you catch yourself at some point thinking, I'm a fan here? And when you got speaking to them, was it just you got lost in the moment, and then you had to realize, oh, hold on a second, I'm actually doing research here to get a book together? Did that ever happen? Because if it was for me, all these names you spoke to, I would probably just spend an hour lost in just their memories and then trying to come back to the whole thing, thinking, oh, yes, I do have a job to do here.
Yeah, I definitely had to do that all the time. Yeah. Talking with somebody like Gary Thorne and Doc Emmerich, you're talking about a national spotlight. You're not zoning. Well, they're both obviously a big part of the New Jersey chapter because that's their stomping grounds. And fortunate enough to be on the national spotlight, Doc on the national spotlight when the Devils beat the Red Wings in the 95 Cup. And so, you kind of want to ask certain things, but you also realize that you're kind of navigating the interview a certain way. And perhaps you have to use a little bit more tact because some things people are a little infamous for. So you don't want to throw that around. You don't want to throw something around that perhaps may bring up some bad memories or something like that. You just kind of let the flow go. But Ken Cowell, when I talked with Ken Cowell, when the book first came out, the Golden Knights, I was in Las Vegas when I wrote this book, grew up in Las Vegas. So this was before the Golden Knights ever came out, the first time the book came out. So I was diehard Red Wings at the time, talking with Ken Cowell. Of course, I just wanted to ask certain things or not, but I let the flow and the conversation flow, and I'm glad I did because Ken's a person who loves what he does and has a fountain of knowledge, and he basically shared his most memorable game, and I'm sure it's still his most memorable game, even though since that game, he called 4 Stanley Cup championships, but that March 26, 1997, that's his most memorable game. And I'm sure it still is to this day. So yes, you do want to geek out, but you also have to realize you have a set itinerary that you set for yourself, and you want to make sure that you get to the core of what you're really trying to do with the book, and that is stress the insanity of it. You may have this most memorable moment and want to ask about that, but they might not even have that even anywhere near it in the memory banks compared to the other stuff that they have. So you try not to steer them to a certain thing. You let them take the wheel.
How long did this take to all come together?
Well, I wrote the original edition back in early 2016. So it took a few months there.
Okay.
And then I added to it for the paperback edition. I interviewed an extra 7 or 8 broadcasters, including Marv Albert. And so and when you mentioned the cover with Vernon and Wah and the fisticuffs, that's the print edition. I decided to get the audio rights back from the publisher because I wanted to add to the book, and I wanted to do it my way, and I wanted to completely have a different format. So that's what I set out to do again back in early 2023. And that took me another few months to start gathering up all the interviews and getting another 23 broadcasters and probably another 32 interviews taking place. It's a collection of a few month processes to get it to where it was. I cut a lot of fat from the first book. I had a lot of just extra filler material that kind of paid homage to the broadcasters of yesterday. And I thought, this is kind of boring. So let's talk about what's happening and what's real.
Right.
And a lot of new stuff was added to the audio edition. I'd say about 40% new material is added on top of what was in the original edition.
It's awesome. A couple more, and then we'll get into the just the kind of the fun portion of this show. I do think that this has been fun, though, with you, of course. So let's not put that aside. Maybe a tough question. Out of the broadcasters you did speak to, past, present, years ago, and recently, is there one that stands out above the rest to you in just any type of way, in that you could go on and on for days with this person, or is there someone that just kind of struck you a little bit more than others?
Oh man, that is a tough question.
If you want to say all 65.
Well, yeah, I mean, talking with Marv Albert probably to me was that moment, mainly just because I was sitting there. It was after the original edition came out, and I'm sitting there watching a hockey game with my buddy in a sports bar, and I turn to him, I go, I'm going to try to get Marv Albert. And he just looks at me like, okay. And I was like, yeah. And it was so easy because of just all the names and all the people I knew and just the mutual acquaintances. It just happened. But talking with Marv Albert, also being a huge basketball fan all during my adolescence and early adulthood, and listening to his calls, I was just tuned into him like that dog on the RCA, the RCA dog, basically just there in front of the speaker, because just hearing him and hearing about how he got his start was just awesome. I mean, Marv Albert, a lot of people probably don't know this, but when he was trying to get the Rangers games broadcast, he had to basically kind of work out deals with country music stations to get a little bit of the period here on their station and some airtime there. Can you imagine Marv Albert asking anybody for airtime today?
No.
And this was him in the 60s and 70s, basically having to try to work it out with a country music station of all people. I can only imagine the country music listeners being like, what just happened? What happened to my radio? Because all of a sudden now you got Rangers hockey in the middle of whatever. And so hearing those kinds of stories, and then hearing about the old arenas like Chicago Stadium, the Montreal Forum, Maple Leaf Gardens.
Joe Louis.
Marv talked about Mel Gard. He was the guy who was like the organ player, basically, and he said that just this. And you look at a picture, if you get on Google and you look up Al Melgard, and he used to be the organist over there in Chicago Stadium, it seriously looks like the Phantom's organ, and it's just in this little this little room. And he said, that thing got that whole building shaking, that whole area shaking. And he said it makes you a little nervous, but you realize everything's all fine. But you're in those small capacities, and that in the way the structure was of the Chicago Stadium, where it was built up instead of out like they are nowadays, it was a completely different time. And so hearing those kinds of things and reaching back, and for Marv reaching back and doing all that, I was like in heaven just listening to all these stories.
Kind of miss those days. I know life evolves and hockey's evolved, but you mentioned the Oregon and the old stadiums, old Maple Leaf Gardens even as well. Yeah, I mean, I know hockey evolves, but you kind of miss that because that was fantastic. It is now too, but it's a lot more flashier. This has been great, Kirk. Before we let you go, let me just, and again, we'll get you to tell everybody where they can get the book. Let's go 77 seconds in with you. Again, you can take as much time as you need. 7 questions I have, and this is what we do at the end of each show that we do. So are you ready for this? They're pretty easy. Yeah, they're pretty easy. Okay, here we go. Any broadcaster that you weren't able to speak to that you really wanted to?
Rick Jeanneret.
Well said. Yes, that would have been a legend for me. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
I talked to him on the phone, and he said, I appreciate it. He says, but I'm working out my own book, and I don't think he ever wrote that book, which is really makes it more of a regret that he just didn't interview with me before he passed.
I know you're a baseball guy, so your choice, one baseball game or one hockey game, which one, and where would you go to see that game?
God, well, I'd have to say a baseball game in Oriole Park at Camden Yards, just because of the venue and the scenery. But if I were to go to one hockey game, a Little Caesars Arena in Detroit.
Beautiful. How many baseball caps do you own?
About 35.
What would you change about baseball, if anything? What would you change about hockey, if anything?
With hockey, I don't think I would change a single thing about hockey. With baseball, I would kind of more lean towards a salary cap. I know that that's a very unpopular thing, but that's what I would lean towards, just to create a little bit more parity.
Should goaltenders in the NHL be somewhat fair game if they come out of the crease?
Absolutely. I mean, they get away with enough.
I'm with you. I absolutely agree.
They get away with enough as it is, and I've seen some goalies I saw the Golden Knights backup goalie. Not my favorite goalie, not Hill, but I saw Samsonov, I think is his name.
Yep.
Goalie go just rail a Red Wing earlier this year. And I was like, I mean, I'm a Golden Knight fan just as much as I'm a Red Wings fan. But I was like, no, you do not do that.
I'm based in Toronto, so back to baseball. Do you think the Blue Jays can actually win the division?
Oh, they'll win the division.
And see how I didn't ask anything else outside of that? So I'm just keeping it at the division.
I think they'll win the division because the Yankees are their own worst enemy. Now, Boston's coming on a little bit, but I think Toronto's got what it takes.
Last one before we let you go. Any chance, based on all this research with the voices of hockey and speaking to these broadcasters, that one day you may become a play-by-play voice?
Oh, no. That's long since gone. I do not have the pipes for it. I can just help them tell their story. That's all I can hope to do.
Well, you did in this book, and the audio version is out too. Why don't you just let us know exactly where people can get it?
So right now, the best place to get it is on Apple Books. You can get it on other audio formats. It's not quite on Audible yet, but it is on Apple Books. And if you guys have Apple devices, it's a real quick download, and it's $9.99. You have it right there on your phone.
This has been Pucks in 7, available on the SiriusXM app and wherever you get your podcasts.